So lavender menace, what does that mean? If lavender's my favorite color, how can it possibly be a menace?
Well, lavender is the choice of most lesbians, and the term was actually started as an insult to us when the ultra right-wing people were trying to find ways to insult us. They called us the lavender menace. So, like many things, we've reclaimed that language, and I am the lavender menace.
So then close by there's a round circle patch with lavender with a black triangle and an axe in it.
Yes, that is the Amazon axe. It dates way back to the Amazons, and it was one of the original lesbian signs, but it fell out of favor because it was actually designed by a man. So, us being as fickle as we are, there was a time where we just didn't want anything male related, and so it fell out of favor. But again, we bring back what's important to us, and I personally love that flag and that symbol.
Okay, and then to counter that, on the left side is a pink triangle.
Pink triangle goes back to the Nazi regime. In the concentration camps, particularly gay men were given and had a patch sewed on their sleeve with the pink triangle, and they were to be identified as queer men and treated as horribly as they were.
And then there's the circle with the two female symbols in between the two.
That's the double women symbol, which in the beginning was an identifier for being lesbian.
There's a red rectangle that says anti-turf.
The term TERF is a trans-exclusionary radical feminist. Particularly, it relates to this time where a lot of the transgender community have not been accepted or not seen as women. And in response to that, we've worked really hard to make sure that people who identify as women are welcome within our community. TERFs tend to exclude trans women all the time and do not identify them as women. But within the general community, if you identify as a woman, we accept you as a woman.
Is there strategic placement of girls to the front right beside that?
Well, no, not really, but it's interesting that you point that out. But, we really have worked hard to make sure that our voices are heard and that we are more present than we have ever been, and that we can bring our strength and knowledge and our experience forward.
Okay, and then there's a story or a patch anyway of Marsha P. Johnson. I'm assuming there's a story there.
Well, Marsha P. Johnson goes back to the Stonewall riots when the police raided it again, and Marsha Thompson went out on the streets and is allegedly the first person to throw a punch. Okay. Her quote is, "I didn't throw the first one, but I certainly threw the second one." And so she is very famous for being transsexual at the time, and just, a strong feminist who fought back. I say feminist, but I mean, a queer trans person who fought back and just kind of sparked the riot, and that was meaningful, as you know. Stonewall is a huge historical site that the current government has torn apart.
And we'll leave that moment of silence there for a minute. Underneath that is the circle, "I'm a safe space." It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, absolutely. I am a safe space. If you are ever in danger or at risk and you need someone, please let it be me.
And you always show up. The underneath that is respect existence or expect resistance.
Yeah, that's the activist in me. If you are going to attack us, we're not going to stand down and just watch. We are going to resist. We're going to persist. We are going to move forward.
Amen, Sista. And the rainbow peace symbol is on the opposite side of that.
Yeah, it's what can you say about that? You know, we really want peace, and peace is defined in so many different ways. But the peace that we as a queer community are looking for is the same peace that any cisgendered person experiences. The right to live freely, to love, to work, to have children, and be safe in our communities. That is what the peace looks like for me. And I know that within the entire community, they have different descriptions of what that means to them. But essentially, we want to be accepted for who we are, just like everybody else.
And then right underneath that is the don't be a drag, just be a queen.
Well, that's a good one, and it speaks to the activism work that I've done specifically in the London region, where in April of 22, I attended with 3 friends in my motorcycle group to a drag story time because they had been receiving so much hatred. And, it has exploded, and our activism for Queens and for the queer community really blew up. And drag queens are, some of my favorite people. They're titans in our community, and they deserve every bit of respect that we can give them because they've always been there for us in different forms, but always there.
Okay. There's two more on the other side. The blue, black and blue one, I'm not for everyone.
Well, that is just my personality. Not everyone sees me the way I want them to see me, which is, a strong guardian, strong female, strong queer person, and, 100% butch. And I'm not for everyone, and that's okay. You don't have to love me, but I am going to stand up for you because that's what butches do, and that's what I do.
And underneath that is the circle that says no harm. But take no shit. But take no shit.
Yeah, well, it's just kind of builds on the I'm not for everyone. And people sometimes give me patches that they think match my jacket. That is one of them because I'm not taking anybody's shit.
And the big square in the back. Queer without fear.
And that is who I am again. What I love about that patch is it's big and it's proud. And it just stands right out. So when I'm sitting in a courtroom defending, someone who's needs some help, there's no question in anybody's mind who I am and what I'm doing.
You have a patch that says she, her.
Yes, those are my pronouns. And what can I say about that? I think, we all have learned to respect people's pronouns over the last numbers of years, and I struggled for a while defining my pronouns. They, them, he, sure, he, her, all of that. But I settled on she, her because that is how I see myself.
All right. I appreciate that they're visible. It's very helpful. A Storytime Guardian, Park Hill Original 5.
That is where the drag Storytime Guardian started. Was in Park Hill. It was a drag story time being presented there in Park Hill, and we had heard stories, so I gathered 4 motorcycle friends. We showed up, and it was horrific, the scene we walked into, and I'll talk more about that later. But after that event, I had these patches designed and given to each of the 5 original Guardians.
Very cool. And for those people who don't know, Park Hill is a very small town in northwest Middlesex County.
Correct.
Sometimes called the Kentucky of Middlesex County. But you are a problem girl.
I am, totally. I have always been. I mean, you'd only have to ask my mother. But I've always been a problem child, for sure. And, back then it was a problem. But now, as, a 72-year-old woman, it's not a problem.
And is that why you fight like a girl?
I fight like a girl.
It's not a problem.
No.
Not a problem at all. I'm very intrigued by the patch over your right shoulder. Chemo rider, still riding. I'm kind of a big deal.
Well, that patch is, an acknowledgement of the leukemia that I have, which has tried to take my life several times, but I continue to live. I'm not dead yet, baby, and it's come pretty close a few times in the last 2 years, and I'm delighted to say that I'm a medical miracle. I've been on a clinical trial for the last year and a half, and my future is bright.
And does that have anything to do with fuck around, find out?
Fuck around and find out is really aimed at a particular group in London, Ontario, currently the knuckle draggers. They're very active in this area, and we get into conflict with them on a regular basis, both on the streets and in the courthouses. And, they have tried some really horrific things, horrific ways to discredit our community and roll us back into the dark ages, and we refuse to go. So, I got that one after we won the first, court case, and it's like, you want to fuck around? You're going to find out.
And it looks like you have the newest Wortley Pride button.
Yes, I'm a big fan of Wortley Pride, and I felt it appropriate. There's so many pride organizations that I'm proud to work with, and guardians attend, but I have a big heart for this group.
Good. And it looks like you're a very proud Canadian.
Yes, and Quebecer. I was born and bred in the Ottawa Valley.
Okay.
And, Canada first, Quebec second.
All right. And Sista Patricia.
That's me.
That's
That's my motorcycle name.
It is. Yeah. FCK NZS.
Fuck Nazis is pretty self-explanatory, and a lot of the white supremacists who attack me and threaten our community are Nazis. So, that's a pretty clear message. Your Nazi white supremacist behavior doesn't scare me. I've met people like you before. You didn't scare me then, and you're certainly not scaring me now.
And then you have the Protect Trans Lives patch.
Yes, we have to. They're under such tremendous threat. And I remember when we were all under that level of threat and what it took to put some protections in place through our human rights code, and we have to protect them. They're so vulnerable and so isolated.
Mm-hmm. You certainly wear a lot of labels. Some of us struggle our entire lives to own one, and look at all the labels that you wear.
Proudly.
Exactly, and confidently. And may I say, as an inspiration to those of us who are still struggling to find which one we can just be so passionate about as you are about so many.
It's surprising how many people, even in the lobby coming up here, a woman said, "I love your vest." It happens to me all the time. Someone might pick out one particular that is meaningful for them,
Yeah.
or someone will just say, what a powerhouse you are to walk around the streets with that vest and all of the messages that you bring with it.
Right. Thank you, Sister Patricia, for joining our ranks this afternoon and letting us hear your story. Most of us spend our entire lives trying to find one label that we can wear and feel like we own authentically. Can you tell us the story of how Patricia came to wear all of those patches proudly and confidently?
The vest and the patches essentially are a part of my story as a motorcycle enthusiast. I have been a rider for a good number of years, and it's a big part of my story in London, Ontario now. But the vest that I had as a motorcyclist didn't really reflect who I am as a queer activist. So I developed this vest over the years. And so I've collected the patches that suited me, and also sometimes people give me a patch that they think will add to my collection. And the entire vest tells a story that I'm really proud of. It is our queer history, particularly on the back, as you noticed. And so many people come up to me, whether they're young or old, and say, "I love your vest. Can I have a picture with you in your vest?" And I think that's great, because one patch of all of them speaks to them. And if that gives them an opportunity to step up and talk to me, I love that. because we all have a story. We're all looking for something that represents us in community.
Absolutely, and that validation somehow, that, oh, I do fit somewhere.
And that I am okay. And that someone's watching out for me, sees me.
And I wonder how many people would be surprised that they would feel an allegiance with you with that vest, when there have also been so many derogatory stories and histories with motorcycle people, you know.
Absolutely.
So tell us about how you wear that label.
You know, there are a lot of motorcyclists who have been a problem, but there's also been an equal number of motorcyclists who do really good work. You know, bikers against child abuse, for instance, against bullies, against all of that. So I have always liked to wear a vest that shows that I'm, in an odd way, approachable, and that I reflect the community that I serve, because I see myself in service to this community. And a motorcycle vest with these patches makes sense to me, and I hope it softens the view of a motorcyclist.
Is there something in your upbringing, in your childhood, in your early teenage or young adult years that led you to want to be of service to people?
Well, I was born and bred in the Ottawa Valley. And when I first came out in Ottawa, it's our seat of parliament. A lot of decisions get made there. The laws get changed there. And so when I came out in that community, I was very fortunate to align myself with some really powerful activists. Marie Robertson, Deb Para, who's currently traveling with Jagmeet Singh on his campaign trail. You know, Rose Stanton, Mary Harvey, the list is endless. And I was really lucky to hook into them. I'll tell you my coming out story, because that kind of leads into it if you wish.
Sure.
So I'm sitting at home in my little apartment, and I'm just sitting there watching TV. And the original Charlie's Angels came on TV. And I'm watching this, and it suddenly a light went off, and I realized that I was watching the women on the program. Kate Jackson, I think, like most lesbians, was drawn to her. And it went bing, bing, bing. I think I'm gay. I'm attracted to her, but I don't even see the men on that program. So I did the logical thing for me. I reached for the phone book. Now, for those of you who are young, you won't remember the phone book that was this thick with the white pages and the yellow pages. So I pulled out the book and I start flipping through to the G's, and I find Gays of Ottawa. So then I did the next logical thing, which was walk over to the telephone that was corded to the wall, because we didn't have cell phones. I called that number, and on the other end was Marie Robertson, who was a volunteer with Gays of Ottawa. And we talked for a long time, to talk about my feelings that I had only started experiencing 10 minutes earlier. And she was very welcoming to me, and we talked for a while, and then we met, and we've been lifelong friends ever since, and we have marched a lot. I was literally parachuted into the political groups, primarily women's groups in Ottawa, and we worked so hard on many, many things: women's reproductive rights, the right to have an apartment and not lose it because we were gay, because at that time you could. If your landlord discovered you were queer, he could evict you without any hesitation.
What year was that?
I came out in 76.
So just to put it in context.
Yeah, that's a long time ago. As well, if you had children and you had divorced your husband because you came out, you could lose your children. That's right. In this day and age, that's ridiculous to even think about. But it's absolutely true. Women had to fight for their children, to keep their children, to keep their parental rights because they were queer. If you ended up in the hospital for some reason and were close to death, your partner could be denied access to you because you were queer.
Wow.
And that happened, too often because the family, whether it's the husband or the parents, could deny you access to your lifelong partner. Those are the kinds of things that we faced back in the 70s and 80s. And it was a long battle. We marched a lot, we fought a lot. The gay men in Ottawa were ridiculously capable of convincing the government to change the laws. In 69, homosexuality and sex between two consenting adults, that was decriminalized in 69. And it has only been since 96 that we continue to have our rights changed and written into the Canadian human rights. So 96 and 1969, those are two really important times in our history as queers.
Well, and I mean, that's 30 years ago. That's well within the lifetime of most people.
Well, and that's why I think it's so important to talk to the youth in our communities. They have no knowledge or experience, I should say, specifically. Some of them will have knowledge if they're reading about it, but they haven't experienced that. They're experiencing the current hardships.
How did you find the confidence to do that? I came out in 97, but I'm an elementary school teacher, so I never came out publicly because I didn't want my students to have to deal with that conflict. So I never marched in a parade until I retired.
I think it was really because of the people that I aligned with. They were seasoned activists and welcomed me with open arms. And they continue to be seasoned activists. So it was very easy for me to just follow their model and to learn to just speak up and also to realize I deserved those rights. I deserved that. How could I be treated differently than anyone else? I'm a good human being. I worked hard, I paid taxes, I did all of those things that good Canadians do, yet I didn't have those rights to the same things that other people did. And that just, pardon my English, burned my piss. And all of us. So we just fought harder. We fought harder all the time.
What kind of consequences did you have to live with for that activism?
You've heard the stories of being taken to a beach by the police, and you could have been beaten. You were often beaten just walking down a street. If you got too close to a dark corner, you could be harassed. You could be beaten. And I'm a feisty little one. My mother taught me to box. My father taught me to dance.
Cool.
But she had a mean laugh, I'll tell you that. So I always felt very confident in defending myself. And I didn't have to defend myself often, but you couldn't ignore the stories of people who were facing that kind of brutality. Groups who would attack us while we were marching, people who would be harassed at home, who would be outed in their jobs and lose their jobs. That's just morally wrong. And so as that really became part and heart of me, I have always walked that line. I am not afraid. And I'm less afraid now at 72 than when I was 42. Because having come as close to death as I have come in the last 2 years due to illness, I ain't dead yet, baby. I got lots of work to do yet. And this is a very dangerous time. And who better than the old timers to stand up and say, we're here for you.
What did you do when you got, or maybe you never got to the place where you felt like, I can't do this anymore. This is too hard. Why aren't people getting on board? Why isn't change happening? I can't do this anymore. Did you get to that place at some point?
Well, I think I was on the other side of the coin as I need to do something. I need to organize something. I need to go to this. I need to go to that. My wife was also a community activist for different types of things. So, our household was always busy with one or the other of us going off to something. And that's just been my life. It's been my entire life. When I first got married to Tony, we, developed a kind of a regular home with dinner parties with her kids and, work, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I have to tell you this. Tony and I were together for 19 years. And I, as an activist, was also anti-marriage. It was never going to be my story. Have you met me? I was not like the other little girls. You never found me in a dress. It was always jeans and a shirt and helping my dad fix the car or building a 7-story treehouse. I was just not like the other girls, so that was not going to be my dream. How could it be? I was a tomboy. I was a queer. It was not going to be my story. So, of course, I thought, I don't need that. I can be just fine, and I don't need that piece of paper to validate me. And then the laws changed. And then I had Tony. And when we celebrated our 15th anniversary, we married. And it changed a lot of things for me because suddenly I wanted that piece of paper. I wanted to stand before my family and friends and declare my love for her. What we had together was beautiful. And we wanted to share that glory, and our families shared it with us openly. And it was a beautiful time. 3 days of a glorious wedding. And I am so grateful that I had that with her, because that was in 10-10-10. She picked that date because she figured I'd remember it.
Sure,
I
I like that idea.
But in 2011, she was diagnosed with cancer and died in 14. And I often look back and think about that joyful day when I stood with her and was able to, really demonstrate in ways that were important to her and I what our love looked like. The day I shall never forget.
Beautiful. I got goosebumps. Yeah. How did you incorporate that into your activism? That it was for you a bit of a shift. I'm not doing that. I'm not following conventional ways. I'm not, and yet it was so authentic and validating for you and life-giving for you. How did you morph that into your activism?
I can't remember when I wasn't an activist in some form, whether it was coming out at work. I never, ever was in the closet. Never. So that presented some challenges, as you can appreciate.
Yeah.
But when Tony died, I was set back on my heels. I didn't know who I was anymore without her. I didn't even know what coffee to buy. 19 years is a long time. A lot of love goes on there, and a lot of work together to develop the kind of life that was important to us. But then it wasn't us anymore, it was me. So I went into a dark place. As anyone who has lost a spouse can imagine. And I worked hard to find myself and to just lean into my strengths. And I just want to say here, I am also been clean and sober for 35 years. So that was a big strength to me as well, to just kind of, follow my program, remember who I am, and find my way. And I was sitting in my little house in Prince Edward County, and I was reading a newsreel about the Picton Catholic priest who had posted in their community bulletin that none of the congregation should attend any pride events because they're after our children. I pretty much had the same.
Makes me want to
I
punch.
had the same feeling as you've just shown. It was stunning to me that in this day and age that could still be relevant. and that someone would openly write that in their Sunday bulletin. So I thought to myself, something's got to be done. And a young man in Picton had organized a peaceful demonstration in front of the church for that Sunday, which was Father's Day. And so I thought, I got to go to that. And it just brought me back to my roots. I arrived, I didn't know anybody because I hadn't been living there that long. So I just kind of watched as people were, children were drawing on the sidewalks, and there was clergy there, and there was teachers there, and queer families with their kids, and I thought, this is a beautiful thing. And then I looked up at the church, and they had really big oak doors, and they were closed. And I thought to myself, those doors should be open to us. So I walked up the steps, and I turned around, and I looked at the crowd, and I hadn't been on those steps for more than 2 minutes when 3 men, I call the Dark Horsemen, came out that door and demanded that I get off the steps. To which I replied, I have every right to be here. I qualify as a Catholic, and I'm staying here. And it drove them nuts. They couldn't have been worse to me than they were. The things that they were saying, that they demanded I get off and trying to bully me into getting off the steps. And at one point I just put my hand up to them and I turned to the crowd and I thought, this is who I need to pay attention to. These 3 horsemen are just representing hate. I want to experience this love in front of me. A young woman came up to me, to the steps, and she said to me, can I stand with you? She was 17. I could have cried.
Yeah.
I could have cried, and I thought to myself at that time, our kids are okay. Not all of them, maybe. But to have this 17-year-old butch walk through that crowd, walk up the steps to stand beside me was another moment in my life I will never forget. But it enraged the 3 horsemen even more and said, we're going to go get the police. And I said, away you go. So off they went into the crowd, and I was chatting with the group, and now they're getting a sense of what's going on, and they're applauding and talking. 5 minutes later, the horseman returns with the only lesbian police officer for 100 miles.
That is priceless.
I know.
I love it.
I could have applauded when I
Yes.
saw her coming up. And she said to me, so what's your plan? And I said, well, it's, about 3 minutes to 10. And in 3 minutes, I'm going to walk through those doors and I'm going to attend Mass. You can imagine the response from these guys. And I'm like, they had no right to stop me. And so they were engaged in telling her to get me off the steps. And she said to them, you need to calm down, sir. I went into Mass with the young butch who attended with me, and I celebrated Mass, and I received communion.
I was just going to ask you, did you do that?
I received communion. I looked him straight in the eye. I don't know if he knew who I was at that moment, but I knew he would know who I was, because we then set about having him removed from that church. It took letter writing and conversations. I called the bishop. We got on it, and he was ultimately removed because when they did the investigation, they had found a history of him interfering with children in another parish. And I'm sure you're not surprised.
Oh, not at all.
Because it's not an uncommon story. They just move them around.
Exactly.
But how dare he tell his parishioners not to attend pride events when he was a pedophile?
And that's a story, unfortunately, we hear far too often.
All the time. So that was a pivotal moment in my coming back to activism. It's one thing just to do that moment, but then we set about as a group, including that 17-year-old butch, to form a committee and have change happen in that community. We did a deposition to the council of Picton, and we laid out 7 things that we were demanding that they do, which included reviewing all of their rights within and how they deal with queer members of the community who are approaching them for services. You know, we just did a lot. And then unfortunately, COVID hit.
Yes.
And that's a whole other story, which is actually how I ended up in London.
Well, then can you tell us that story?
Well, I was sitting in my little house again, and it's COVID, and my sister, I have family here in London, one of whom is my sister, who's 86 now. And she has saved my life more times than I can shake a stick at. And she was lonely. She was struggling because she couldn't go to her meetings, she couldn't be with her friends, she could visit with her kids out on the deck. But she was really struggling, and I thought, I have to go. So I sold my house within a month, and I moved to London to be with my sister. And I've been here ever since, and she's, a big supporter. It took me 2 years to get her to call me queer.
Okay.
She's of that generation. She said, I can't call you queer. And I'm like, I'm giving you permission to call me queer, because that's what I am. And we've reclaimed that language.
And what was that process like for you? And maybe put the context into why it wasn't okay in the beginning.
Well, there are several cathedrals named after my sister.
Ah.
So she's a staunch Catholic, very religious and very conservative in many of her ways. And so, as much as she and I have developed our relationship to just be accepting of the differences between us, over decades, we always approached each other with love. And that certainly became something that I often fall back on when I'm facing crowds who hate me. I go in with, they just don't know me. I'm a really good person. I have family who love me. So, when I would go over a visit, again, never being in the closet, I would talk about the things that I was up to all the time. And so I'm going to this Pride event, or I'm doing this. And, and I would speak about the queer community using that language. And she'd say, I can't call you that. It's just such an insult. And I said, it used to be. So we worked on it. And about, I'm going to say 6 months ago was the first time she called me queer. And I could have cried. It was just such an acknowledgement of me for who I see myself as. Not just her sister, but a member of the queer community. She asks about what events I'm doing. She has expressed to me, as we have become more prominent in the community for the activist work we do as guardians, she said, what if they come after me? That was her fear.
Mm.
She's vulnerable. She's isolated. And I thought to myself, I need to hear this. I need to figure out a way to ensure that she feels safe while I do what I do.
Mm-hmm.
So I changed my name. Hence, Sista Patricia Derwine. There are only a handful of people in London that know my real name. And all of Ottawa. And that's how I work hard to protect my sister. I live in I'm very secluded where I live. I have a Facebook page that is very tight. I know they're looking for me because they tell me they are.
Who's they?
Well, there's Bubba Pollock. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the name.
No.
I'll try and keep this one short for you. Bubba Pollock was one of the first white supremacists that I met in Park Hill, as a matter of fact. He was holding up giving his little Proud Boys hand signals. The story that is perhaps most important is that about 1.5 years ago, one of our guardians posted on his girlfriend's Facebook page, do you not know what a monster he is? I'm not saying that was the right thing to do, but he has been a horrible person So he took offense at that and started attacking her on social media. And then one day, in his brilliance, because he lives in London, she lived in Windsor, he got someone to drive him to Windsor. They stopped somewhere along the way and picked up some flowers and a get well card. Went to Windsor, found the hospital where her father was in palliative care, went up to his room and took a selfie with her dying father and sent it to her. Now that's pretty sick.
Very.
But it also sends a strong message that you're not safe from us. That terrorized her. And it took a lot of community support and legal help to get him into court for criminal harassment. And she was successful at having him. The charges went through. He was imprisoned for a very short period of time and is now out on extensive probation. And that's not the only case with him, but that's the worst one.
Mm-hmm.
And his supporters attend the court cases, and so did guardians. We all sat in the front row to show her support, but to show them that we were there. And that's, after the court session, whatever it was that day, they would come up and threaten me.
Tell us about the Guardians. How did you get connected?
Well, I'm actually the founder.
Okay, I did not know
It
that.
started out as Drag Storytime Guardians.
Right.
And that was exclusively what we were doing for almost 2 years, was attending any drag story time or pride event that wanted our support. And we felt that as we grew, because there's over 900 members in our group, 982 I think today, that we wanted to expand the types of things that we felt were important to our community. But the name Drag Storytime Guardians was really specific.
Right.
So we changed it to Guardians in Action. And so that is what we do. And I'll say on Saturday, we're actually in St. Thomas protesting the Conservative candidate there, who is a horrible man, Andrew Lawton. Horrible, horrible, homophobic, racist white supremacist. So those are the kinds of things that we think are equally important to what we do in the community, is to support trans rights. We have a big election coming up, so why wouldn't we want to make sure that we're seen and that we're safe and that we are voting appropriately?
Mm-hmm.
School trustee meetings, they're loading up the deck with ultra-conservative trustees, and we need to be paying attention to that. We need to be present, and that means going out. So when I see people, I encourage them to join, and I encourage them to stand up, get out of their chair, and come join us. Because the world is changing, and it's getting worse. The challenges we face now are equally great to what it was in 1976. They would love to roll back our rights. And we can't allow that. We can't allow that. We have responsibility as elders. We have responsibility. And what I want to say about that is that in our march towards our rights, we did that with the intention of creating a better future for our children. I'm not a parent, but I really wanted children to have rights that I didn't have. To be free to play and dress how they please without criticism. To not be told that you can't live here anymore because you're queer. We had to fight for that. And I wanted them to recognize that they're our children. We have fought for you, and we will continue to fight for you because, oh my God, look at what they've done. When you look at the youth today, you have to be in awe of them. We created a world for them, and we need to protect it. And they are creating whole new languages, ways of being, gender fluid, transsexual people are just, I'm so happy for them because it wasn't even a possibility back in 1953 when I was born. I always said when I was a kid I wanted to be a boy. And it's only been the last 5 years that I've really been able to settle that within myself, to recognize that it wasn't that I wanted to be a boy. I wanted to do the things that boys do. And that's when I thought, this is who I am. I'm a proud, old-fashioned, old-school butch. And I will be that till the day I die. Because that is who I am. But it doesn't mean I can't respect who people are today. And so when I hear seniors or elders or anybody saying, I just can't get into these pronouns, I don't know what the point is. Well, it's maybe not your issue. But if you really want to support our youth, listen to them. Pay attention to what's important to them. And if it's as simple as changing their pronouns, it's the least you would do for your child, the very least. We have to give them the room to grow because they are our future. And the only way that they're going to talk to us is if we invite them to the conversations. And not with us instructing them, but to listen to them, just as I was mentored by that 17-year-old who taught me a lot about what our youth today need and want. I believe we as elders have a responsibility to listen to them and to learn from them. We don't need to speak down to them about the olden days. I want to talk about the future. And that's where these intergenerational panels come in really handy. I've attended a few of them for different groups, and I think it's really important. I want them to depend on us, to know that we are there for them. We are their parents. We are their grandparents.
And so then how do we have those difficult and delicate conversations with them about learning the pronouns that are unfamiliar to some of us?
How do we have the conversations with who?
With the youth. And are there ways that they can identify themselves with their preferred pronouns, or how important those pronouns are, that it's not just a phase, because you hear that sometimes, it's just a phase. They're
It's not a
teenagers,
phase.
They're teenagers,
It's their life.
Exactly. And we know that labels are very important, and
Yes.
they're very something we're very passionate about. So what can we do as elders amongst ourselves to have those conversations with our peers about how important it is to listen to what the youth have to say?
I think if we shared our experiences with our children and our grandchildren, how, such as I've just done to talk about how I taught my sister 86 years to call me queer, how I have a lot of youth who come to me and talk to me. And the difference is, I don't start the conversation so much as, hello, how are you? What's your name? What do you do? And to encourage them to talk, because they will if they feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
So if I was to give anyone, an elder, advice who has queers in their family, it would be to say, sit down at a table. Sit down at dinner. Ask them a question and listen to the answer. Because they will tell you. But if they're afraid that you are going to judge them negatively for who they are, the conversation's going to stop. We need to be less judgmental, just like we didn't want our parents and grandparents to judge us. Have we forgotten what that feels like?
I certainly haven't.
No.
So what is your sage advice for the generations coming behind us who potentially feel like there is no hope? Who are living in a world where people's reactions and responses are instant, they're public because of social media, they're accusatory, they're demeaning. And then the people of our generation who say, but why can't you allow me to make that mistake of what your pronouns are without immediately becoming demeaning and disrespectful to me? Where is the pass that you have willing to give me, who has a 65-year-old brain, that will take 3 or 4 or maybe 5 tries to learn those pronouns? I am 1000% supportive. I want to be your strongest walking partner on this journey. But this is new for me. And can you exercise some grace towards me? Which means for me that although you think I'm unforgivable because I misgendered you, that you will forgive me. And that you will allow me to make those mistakes as we journey together. And that approach is how we build the team that wants to journey with you. That to me is what feels like it's missing. I experienced that with my own grandchildren. I have a non-binary grandchild. And that it's that same, you know, that's my dead name. You said my dead name. Don't say my dead name. It was a busy day. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You know that I don't usually. I'm sorry. Can you let it go this time? No. All right, then what are we gonna do? You know that I will try harder when I return to your chosen name. And we have to just have those conversations without being accusatory and unforgiving to people who are really trying to be supportive and want to be.
I hear all of that, and I think you've hit that nail right on the nose. How do we be more gentle with each other? Some of that is tone of voice. Some of that is the language we use. Can you give me a break? That becomes a little more assertive as opposed to, I'm sorry I said that. Let's just step back for a moment and let me reword that.
Mm-hmm.
And reword that properly with intention. If you have to follow it up with, I really do see you for who you are. And I am going to make mistakes.
And I want to celebrate who you are and who you are
I
becoming.
want to celebrate with you.
Yeah.
Changing the language is the key element. So if you give some thought to what words you have used in this conversation and figured out ways you can say that in a more gentle fashion, that's helpful. Be more inviting, and also, we have to remember that, how old did you say you were?
I'm 65.
So, yes, you have a 65-year-old brain. I have a 72-year-old brain.
That is.
And they might have a 20-year-old brain or a 15-year-old brain. And I remember what it was like to be that age and to be rebellious, and insulted by my parents who didn't accept me for being the tomboy I was. I don't think that maturity comes at 15.
No.
So we have to meet them where they are, not have them meet us where we are. They're just not there yet in many cases. A lot of our transgendered community are struggling with all of the testosterone they're on, and what that creates in their confuses their body and their mind. And I don't know that people are truly aware of the impact of that. And how can we help? How can we be more understanding of that? Also, entering into a gentle conversation is really what helps us welcome people into the conversation. I've seen terrible division in this community. I'll use London as an example because I've only been here, a short number of years. And when I stepped into it, I'm like, well, the gay men aren't really talking to the lesbians. The trans aren't talking to the gay people. They don't want to be called queer because they feel like they're outside of the community and aren't really welcome. And You know, I'm a butch, I'm a dinosaur for Christ's sakes. They don't even know who I am. You know, let alone a high femme who passes a little easier, you know, but, you know, so how do I walk the earth as a big old butch? You know, it's hard to miss me.
But it's easy to love you.
Well, exactly. When I say I'm not for everyone, it's just because that's the message I want the haters to get. I really am for everyone. You know, I'm a gentle soul. I'm kind, I'm generous, my family loves me. It's the haters who hate me, and I'm okay with that.
Because you call them on it.
I call them on it, and I'm not afraid of them.
Yeah.
But to get back to our conversation, I see so much division and it breaks my heart.
Mhm.
And I've had a lot of conversations lately about why is it, but not just why is it, how do we fix it?
Yes.
Because back when I came out, we knew that we had to work together. We marched together and then we went out to the bars together and we celebrated our wins together. I see so much less of that now.
Yes.
We all go to our little corners. We don't spend time together as a group very much. And I've had the opportunity of doing that with guardians. After an event, I say, why don't we all go to such and such a place and have lunch together? And I get to hear their stories because I ask them about their stories. Tell me about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Those are such important conversations for an elder to show grace and interest in what our youth is doing, for them to feel validated in who they are and who they're trying to be.
And I think it's one thing to say that the world is a different place than it was 50 years ago.
Mm.
I came out at 40. I was a very late bloomer with 4, soon-to-be teenagers. And the world was a different place then, but the journey is the same. And so how can we help them navigate the same journey, maybe not with all the same steps, maybe not with all the same challenges, but that journey of arriving at who you are, owning it, living it authentically in the world, really has all the similar pieces to it, no matter how you got there and how windy or how straight your path was, how supported or how opposed people were.
Unsupported you were.
Exactly, to this journey. And we have more in common than we have differences. And it feels
Yes.
like we've lost that. So I guess part of why we applied for the grant to be able to do this is so that we can hear the senior story. We can use it in many different ways where people can say, wow, that kind of was the same. Like you really were harassed and sought after negatively.
In danger.
And exactly, in your journey, and had to change your name because of that. Like there's significant consequences for that. And so that's, there's so many similarities, but we all need to take time to listen, to understand, rather than listen to respond.
Correct.
There's a big
Correct.
difference.
It's active listening.
Very big.
I want
difference.
you to talk to me about hope a little bit. I know what hope means to me. How do we share that hope and mold it into current events? How do we give our children hope for the future?
As somebody who's parented 4 kids and has 9 grandchildren, 8 of whom are teenagers, I will say that this is the instant generation, and hope isn't instant. It's not fulfilled instantly. It's what makes you get up every day and put one foot in front of the other, even though you're walking in the swamp and you don't know what's going to bite you. But you do it because you believe that it's there, because you've experienced it there. But when you're in the instant generation and 30 seconds of TikTok becomes your goal, it is very difficult to live in an environment of hope and to have that belief of hope. So then when the slightest challenges come forward, instantly your hope is gone. My life isn't worth living. This is too hard. I can't do this anymore. And that's where I think we need to be there and say, this is a flip in your timeline, a tiny little flip in your timeline, which seems like the worst you've ever gone through. And for some people, it is the worst, and maybe perhaps will be the worst, but it isn't the end. There's always hope on the other side. There are people who are here for you if you will let us in. There are those of us that want to walk with you and support you and celebrate you if you will let us in. And no, we won't get it instantly. We won't.
Tell
We
me,
will make mistakes.
What about a time where you felt it was hopeless for you?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I have ever felt that it was hopeless. I knew it was going to be bleeping hard, really difficult to leave a marriage, to come out, to enter into a lesbian relationship that lasted 28 years and transformed all of us. But it was excruciatingly difficult. But I believed that through the hard work, and I had to set aside things. I had to set aside some of my own personal goals so that I knew that everybody that was journeying with me was accounted for and cared for, and I kept checking in with all the time. And this might happen. How is this going to be? How are we going to do this? I was always hopeful, and I'm a naive optimist. Everything is way easier than I think it's going to be. I think everything's way easier than it's going to be. So I am a naive optimist that we will get there. So I can't say that I've ever felt hopeless, ever. I have experienced despair, and oh my God, will this ever end? But I have not ever felt hopeless. I just don't think that's my nature.
I think for myself, that feeling of hopelessness has been present in my life. I felt hopeless when my wife passed away because she was my rock, my everything. But I survived that, and I reinvented myself, somewhat brought my old self more forward and modified it to meet the current community. And I like to meet them in their place. I think at my age, maybe yours as well, we've experienced tremendous change in our lives. And we could never, I can't imagine I ever hoped that I would find love like I did. I hoped I would, but I couldn't think that that was going to be my story until it was. And so when you experience tremendous change, and I look at my alcoholism, I was a raging alcoholic and drug user. And it took a lot of work. And now I'm 35 years clean and sober. I have friends, I have family who love me. I have respect from a lot of people in my community. Those are things I never imagined when I was busy in the bar drinking all day. Stealing drinks off of people's bar tables because I'd run out of money. Change is possible. We can do this, and we have to reach down and help people up. That's, for me, is a critical part of what I do, is to reach, and I shouldn't say the word down. I should reach over and invite someone to join me, or can I join you was even better. So I've experienced great change and great hope. And, it's coming our way. But we are in danger. We are totally in danger right now. And so, we need to keep working towards positive change. We need to keep our kids safe. And we can only do that if we're having conversations with them.
And I think that we need to be together as a community more than ever before.
Absolutely.
Because the kind of attacks that we are under now are different than what they were before, because they are so public, they are so far reaching, they become personal when people's accounts get hacked.
Yes.
They become far more invasive than I think they were in the past.
Yeah.
And I'm not so sure that the powers that could defend us will.
And that's why we need to get out and vote.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Because the polls, this is my spiel these days, is the polls are showing certain things.
Yeah.
But you still have to get up and vote.
Yeah.
You know, and I think my generation, your generation, and many of our older generations, we vote because we recognize that right and the importance of having the right people in the right place. I really want our younger generation to know that and to take that hour and go out and vote for positive change. Because if we don't, well, we don't have to look far to see what will happen,
Exactly.
you know?
And I hope that that will sort of,
See, there's hope.
yeah, I hope that will motivate people. We are seeing what change is happening south of the border because, you know, maybe people thought there was no point.
Well,
There
with all
is
of
a
your
point.
children and all of your grandchildren, if you
Yeah.
phoned each and every one of them and said,
I'm
I'm
picking
hoping,
you up.
no, I'm hoping you're gonna vote and I would love to drive you.
Yes. Yeah.
How
And
easy
maybe
is
we
that?
need to
Just,
do that
are
for
you
our
gonna
kids,
vote?
You know, can we put
Well,
a
why
notice
aren't you
out?
gonna vote?
I'm actually working at the election all day.
Good job.
Yeah, I've done
Good for
that
you.
the last
That's a
3
great
now.
example.
Because I can, because I'm retired now, so I can do that. But
Yeah.
But so I think, I mean, we need to be that beacon of hope for them.
We really do.
And we do need to have those delicate conversations about it's not instant,
Mm-hmm.
about we need to have a pass available when we do make mistakes. We need to recognize our commonality rather than our differences. And we will get there if we want to. If we believe that it's the place we want to be, we will get there. But it's work. It doesn't just happen.
No,
Yeah,
it
it's
doesn't
work
just
and
happen.
it's time.
And, you know, when you talked earlier about, you know, a good part of our elder community is just tired of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they just want to play cards, you know, play bridge, the things that are important to them now,
Yeah.
which I don't mean to diminish. But we are the brain trust of our generation. And our children aren't going to know what it took for us to get here so that they could move forward. You know, I want us to stand up and be the elders that we needed. We had elders in our communities, absolutely. But we need to be the elders now, actively, not just say, oh, back in my day.
Mm-hmm. That's a wonderful call to action.
Yeah.
That's a great way.
We need
for
to
us
build on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Talk to your friend, talk to your
Wonderful.
friends.
Yeah, call to action, exactly.
You
Get
know,
our friends. and,
Support
you know,
QX. Support every organization. You know, let's work together, and that happens through conversation.
for sure. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you. It's inspiring to have your energy and your wisdom and your experience among us.
It's not just me, it's you too.
There are lots. It's there everywhere. It
Yeah.
is, and
We
that's
need to light that flame in each other.
Exactly. And so we need to call our couple friends, and you call your couple of friends, and we need to get together for 4 or 5 of us and say, wow, and then just grow.
If I can get off my deathbed,
that way.
which I have done,
Yes.
and continue to attend and support my community, surely to God, you can too.
Yeah.
And I'm not meaning you personally.
No.
We need to get up and do it.
Because our golden years are under threat right now.
Oh
and
my
they
God.
will not be golden if we sit by passively and wonder
We
what
get a
everybody else
little
is
too
doing.
complacent,
Yeah, we do.
and it becomes harder as we age. You know, my knees don't work as
Yeah.
well as they used to. My hearing is going, and now I've got to go get a hearing test,
Yeah,
but I'm still marching.
good for you.
Thank you for having me here today.
It's been an honor.
Thank
honestly.
you.
Thank
See you on the
so
line.
much. Yeah.